Right now, as you listen to these words, invisible forces are shaping your thoughts, directing your choices, and programming your responses to serve agendas you never consented to follow. They don't use chains or cages, they use something far more sophisticated, your own desire to be good, normal, and accepted. They've built a system so elegant in its design that you defend your own imprisonment, police your own thoughts, and volunteer for your own submission while believing you're free. Tonight we tear away the veil to expose the most insidious truth of modern existence. They want you obedient, and they've made obedience feel like virtue. In the grand theater of social control, there exists no more perfect prisoner than the one who believes they are free. This prisoner doesn't rage against their chains because they can't see them. They don't plan escape because they don't recognize their captivity. They don't question their guards because those guards speak the language of care, protection, and collective good. These prisoners have been given the most sophisticated form of bondage ever devised, a system that makes slavery feel like citizenship, submission feel like virtue, and obedience feel like moral excellence. Tonight we descend into the shadowy realm where power operates not through force but through the far more effective mechanisms of compliance manufacturing, where your authentic desires are replaced with manufactured needs, where your natural rebellion is channeled into harmless outlets that serve the very system you think you're resisting. We will explore how every institution you trust, every authority you respect, and every social norm you follow serves a hidden agenda that benefits from your predictable compliance more than your genuine flourishing. Through the ruthless political analysis of Niccolò Machiavelli, who understood that the most effective control operates by making subjects complicit in their own domination, through the mass psychology insights of Gustave Le Bon, who revealed how crowds can be manipulated to act against their own interests, through the shadow dynamics of Carl Jung, who showed how collective unconscious patterns can be exploited to suppress individual consciousness, through the herd mentality critique of Friedrich Nietzsche, who recognized that social conformity is the enemy of authentic human development, through the manufacturing consent analysis of Edward Bernays and Noam Chomsky, who exposed how opinion is shaped to serve power rather than truth, and through the insights of those who have recognized that freedom is not given but taken from systems designed to prevent its emergence. We will uncover the sophisticated machinery of obedience that surrounds you. By the end of this philosophical revelation, you will understand why good people are the easiest to control, why your desire to help others is used against you, why your moral instincts are weaponized to serve immoral purposes, and why recognizing the system's hidden agenda is the first step toward authentic freedom that threatens everything the system has built to maintain your compliance. The question that will determine whether you remain a willing participant in your own submission or become a conscious agent of your own liberation is this: are you ready to see how your obedience serves others' power more than your own interests? And are you strong enough to choose rebellion, even when rebellion means abandoning the comfortable illusions that make obedience feel like virtue? The architecture of control. The modern system of control operates through what Machiavelli would recognize as the most sophisticated application of political power ever devised. A structure so complex and multifaceted that it can maintain dominance without appearing dominating, extract compliance without seeming coercive, and prevent rebellion by making rebellion appear selfish, antisocial, or morally questionable. Unlike historical forms of tyranny that relied on obvious force and created obvious enemies, contemporary control operates through what appears to be choice, opportunity, and democratic participation. You are not forced to comply. You are educated to want to comply. You are not compelled to obey. You are conditioned to find satisfaction in obedience. You are not enslaved. You are convinced that your voluntary servitude represents freedom, civic duty, and moral development. This architecture operates through multiple interconnected systems that each appear benevolent individually while combining to create comprehensive control over thought, behavior, and aspiration. The educational system doesn't appear to be designed for obedience. It claims to develop critical thinking while actually teaching you to accept authority, follow instructions, and measure your worth through external validation from experts who may not have your best interests at heart. The economic system doesn't appear coercive. It offers opportunities for advancement, while creating conditions where advancement requires conformity to standards that serve the system's stability more than individual fulfillment. You are free to pursue any career you want, as long as that career fits within structures designed to extract maximum value from your labor, while providing minimum autonomy over your time, energy, and creative expression. The political system doesn't appear tyrannical. It provides choices between alternatives that have been pre-selected to ensure that any outcome serves the same underlying power structures. You can vote for change as long as that change doesn't threaten the fundamental arrangements that concentrate power in the hands of those who benefit from your compliance with their preferences. The media system doesn't appear propagandistic. It provides information and entertainment while shaping your understanding of what's normal, possible, and desirable in ways that serve advertising objectives, political agendas, and social control more than your authentic development or accurate understanding of reality. Each system operates through the illusion of choice, while actually providing options that have been curated to serve outcomes predetermined by those who designed the choice architecture. You can choose any color you want, as long as it's one of the colors that serve the system's objectives. You can pursue any dream you want, as long as that dream requires you to remain obedient to structures that benefit from your participation more than your liberation. The genius of this approach lies in its ability to make you feel empowered by choices that actually limit your power, grateful for opportunities that actually constrain your possibilities, and satisfied with freedoms that actually represent sophisticated forms of slavery that you defend because you mistake them for liberation. The system doesn't need to force your compliance because it has taught you to want to comply. It doesn't need to suppress your rebellion because it has channeled your rebellious energy into outlets that ultimately serve its stability. It doesn't need to silence your voice because it has taught you to speak in language that serves its narratives rather than your authentic understanding. The psychology of manufactured consents. Edward Bernays, the founder of modern public relations, understood something that changed the nature of social control forever. People will voluntarily comply with agendas that serve others' interests if those agendas are presented in language that appears to serve their own interests, values, and desires. This insight created the foundation for what Noam Chomsky later called manufacturing consent, the systematic creation of public opinion that serves power while appearing to emerge from grassroots sentiment. The manufacturing process operates through sophisticated understanding of human psychology, particularly the recognition that people make decisions based on emotion and justify those decisions with logic, that they want to belong to groups that reflect well on their self-image, and that they prefer simple explanations to complex realities that might require uncomfortable moral choices or personal sacrifices. Consider how this operates in practice. Instead of demanding that you accept lower wages, the system teaches you that lower wages represent competitive pricing that creates jobs and serves the economy. Instead of requiring that you work longer hours, it frames extended work as career development and team commitment that serves your professional advancement. Instead of forcing you to accept surveillance, it presents monitoring as security and protection that serves your safety and convenience. Each reframing transforms what might be experienced as oppression into something that appears to serve your interests, making resistance seem not just ungrateful, but actually contrary to your own welfare. The system doesn't need to force your compliance when it can make compliance appear to be enlightened self-interest. The process also operates through what psychologists call social proof, the tendency to determine appropriate behavior by observing what others are doing rather than by independent analysis of costs and benefits. When everyone around you appears to accept certain conditions, arrangements, or limitations, it becomes psychologically difficult to question whether those conditions actually serve anyone's authentic interests. The system cultivates this social proof by creating visible examples of compliance and making non-compliance invisible or unattractive. Success stories feature people who succeeded by following system-approved paths, while failure stories feature people who suffered consequences for attempting alternatives. This creates the impression that compliance leads to success, while non-compliance leads to failure, regardless of whether this correlation reflects causation or simply selective presentation of examples. Media representation reinforces manufactured consent by consistently portraying certain types of people, lifestyles, and choices as normal, desirable, and morally acceptable, while portraying alternatives as abnormal, undesirable, or morally questionable. You learn what to want by observing what appears to be wanted by people you're taught to admire, respect, or envy. The sophistication lies in making this influence feel like personal choice, rather than external manipulation. You don't feel forced to want what the system needs you to want. You genuinely experience wanting it because the system has shaped the conditions under which your wants develop. Your desires feel authentic to you because they are authentic to the environment that shaped them, even when that environment was designed to produce those specific desires. Breaking free from manufactured consent requires recognizing that many of your preferences, priorities, and assumptions about what's normal or desirable may have been shaped by forces that benefit from your compliance with their objectives, rather than emerging from your authentic values and genuine self-knowledge. This recognition doesn't require paranoia or conspiracy thinking. It simply requires understanding that powerful systems naturally evolve mechanisms for maintaining their stability, and that one of the most effective mechanisms is shaping the preferences of participants so that they voluntarily support system objectives rather than requiring coercion to maintain compliance. The illusion of choice. Perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of modern control systems is their ability to provide extensive choices while ensuring that all available choices serve the same underlying objectives. You can choose from dozens of breakfast cereals, hundreds of television channels, thousands of consumer products, and multiple political candidates, while having almost no choice about the fundamental structures that determine how your society operates, how your economy functions, or how your political system makes decisions that affect your life. This illusion operates through what systems theorists call bounded rationality, the limitation of choices to options that fall within predetermined parameters that serve system stability rather than individual autonomy. You are free to choose any option you want, as long as every option supports the arrangements that benefit from your continued participation in roles that serve others more than yourself. The economic system illustrates this perfectly. You can choose any career you want from hundreds of available options, but almost every career requires you to trade your time, energy, and creativity for money on terms determined by others who profit from your labor more than you do. You can choose to work for any employer who will hire you, but almost every employer operates according to structures designed to extract maximum value from employees while providing minimum autonomy over work conditions, schedules, or creative expression. You can choose to start your own business, but that business must operate within regulatory, financial, and competitive frameworks designed to serve existing power structures rather than to maximize your independence, creativity, or ability to serve authentic values that might conflict with profit maximization or system stability. The educational system provides similar bounded choices. You can study any subject offered by accredited institutions, but accreditation ensures that all subjects are taught in ways that prepare you for compliance with existing systems rather than for critical analysis of whether those systems serve human flourishing. You can choose any major you want, as long as that major prepares you for roles that serve economic structures designed to benefit from your educated compliance, rather than your educated rebellion. Even your entertainment choices operate within bounds designed to serve system objectives. You can choose from countless movies, television shows, books, and games, but the vast majority reinforce values, assumptions, and desires that support continued participation in arrangements that benefit content creators and their sponsors more than they serve your authentic development or critical understanding of your circumstances. The political system provides perhaps the most obvious example of bounded choice. You can vote for any candidate who successfully navigates the nomination process, but that process is designed to ensure that all viable candidates support fundamental arrangements that serve power structures rather than challenging them. You can choose between different approaches to managing the system, but you cannot choose to replace the system with alternatives that might better serve human flourishing. This boundedness creates the psychological experience of freedom while maintaining the practical reality of control. You feel empowered by your ability to choose, while remaining unaware that your choices have been curated to ensure that any choice you make serves objectives you never agreed to support and may not even understand. The illusion is maintained through constant emphasis on the choices you have, rather than attention to the choices you don't have. Marketing, media, and political messaging focus relentlessly on the options available within approved parameters, while making alternatives invisible, impractical, or socially unacceptable. Breaking through this illusion requires developing what could be called choice consciousness, the ability to recognize when your choices have been predetermined by others and to identify the interests served by the limitation of choices to approved options. This consciousness allows you to seek alternatives that may not be advertised, promoted, or socially supported, but that better serve your authentic development and values. The weaponization of virtue. One of the most insidious aspects of modern control systems is their ability to use your genuine moral instincts against you, transforming your desire to be good, helpful, and socially responsible into mechanisms for extracting compliance with agendas that may actually serve purposes opposite to what your virtue would support if you understood those purposes clearly. This weaponization operates through what Carl Jung would recognize as the exploitation of your persona, the socially acceptable face you present to the world against your authentic self-interest and genuine moral development. The system teaches you to define virtue in ways that serve its objectives rather than your authentic values, making you feel morally superior for behaviors that actually diminish your power to create positive change. Consider how this operates across different domains. In the workplace, you're taught that being a good employee means accepting whatever conditions your employer offers without negotiation, working extra hours without additional compensation, and prioritizing company objectives over your own development. The virtue of loyalty is weaponized to prevent you from seeking better opportunities or negotiating for fair treatment. In social relationships, you're taught that being a good person means accommodating others' preferences, even when those preferences conflict with your legitimate needs, avoiding conflict, even when conflict would resolve important issues, and sacrificing your resources to help others, even when such help enables their dysfunction rather than supporting their growth. In political contexts, you're taught that being a good citizen means accepting the decisions of authorities, even when those authorities make decisions that harm your interests, supporting policies that claim to help others, even when those policies primarily benefit powerful interests, while providing symbolic help to the supposed beneficiaries, and feeling guilty about pursuing your own interests, even when your success would create value for others as well. Each of these virtue definitions serves to extract compliance, resources, and energy from you, while making resistance appear selfish, uncaring, or socially irresponsible. Your genuine desire to be a good person becomes the mechanism through which others control your behavior to serve their interests, rather than the common good that virtue should actually serve. The weaponization is particularly effective because it operates through your own moral self-monitoring. You don't need external authorities to force compliance when you've internalized moral frameworks that make non-compliance feel like personal moral failure. You police yourself according to virtue definitions that serve others' power more than authentic moral development. This creates what psychologists call moral injury, the psychological damage that results from being forced to act against your authentic moral instincts while being told that such action represents virtue. You feel increasingly disconnected from your genuine values, while simultaneously feeling proud of your supposed moral development, creating internal fragmentation that serves system stability by preventing you from developing the coherent moral vision that would enable effective resistance. The defense against virtue weaponization requires what Nietzsche called the revaluation of all values, the systematic examination of every moral belief you hold to determine whether it serves authentic human flourishing or system maintenance that may actually prevent human flourishing. This revaluation involves asking hard questions about whether your moral behaviors actually create the outcomes your morality claims to support. Does your workplace loyalty actually serve your colleagues and customers? Or does it enable poor management that harms everyone except those who profit from your uncompensated compliance? Does your social accommodation actually help others develop better relationship skills? Or does it enable them to remain selfish while feeling good about their selfishness? Does your political obedience actually serve the common good? Or does it enable policies that serve powerful interests while providing symbolic benefits to others? True virtue requires the strength to act according to authentic moral principles, even when such action appears unvirtuous to those who benefit from virtue definitions that serve power rather than genuine moral development. Sometimes being genuinely good requires being willing to appear bad to those who profit from your accommodation of their preferences for your limitation. The economic chains of compliance. The economic system serves as perhaps the most effective mechanism for ensuring obedience because it operates through apparently voluntary exchange while creating conditions where you must comply with arrangements that serve others' interests more than your own in order to meet basic survival needs and social acceptance requirements. This system doesn't force you to work. It simply makes not working economically impossible for most people, while ensuring that working requires accepting conditions that extract maximum value from your time, energy, and creativity, while providing minimum autonomy over how those resources are deployed. You are free to choose any job you can get, as long as almost every available job requires you to trade your life force for money on terms determined by others who profit from that trade more than you do. The genius of this arrangement lies in making economic survival dependent on your participation in structures designed to benefit from your participation more than to serve your development, creativity, or authentic values. You must work to live, but most available work requires you to spend your life serving objectives you didn't choose, using methods you may not respect, under conditions that may damage your health, relationships, or personal development. Even when you succeed economically, that success typically requires continued compliance with system expectations that may conflict with your authentic desires for how to spend your time, energy, and attention. The more successful you become within system parameters, the more invested you become in maintaining those parameters rather than questioning whether they serve human flourishing or simply concentrate wealth and power in the hands of those who designed the system. The economic chains operate through what economists call golden handcuffs, benefits that require continued compliance to maintain, creating psychological investment in arrangements that may not serve your authentic interests, but that you cannot afford to lose once you become dependent on them. Your mortgage, your health insurance, your retirement account, your children's education costs, all create pressures to maintain employment that serves system objectives rather than your own development. Consumer culture reinforces these chains by creating artificial needs that require continued economic participation to satisfy. You learn to want things that require money to obtain, creating dependence on income sources that may require you to compromise your values, sacrifice your time with family, or accept stress levels that damage your health and relationships. The system also creates what sociologists call lifestyle inflation, the tendency for your expenses to increase with your income, ensuring that you never achieve sufficient financial independence to make choices based on your authentic values rather than economic necessity. No matter how much you earn, you typically find ways to spend it that require continued earning at levels that prevent the financial freedom that would allow authentic choice about how to spend your life. Breaking free from economic chains requires developing what could be called economic consciousness, understanding how your financial choices either support your autonomy or bind you more tightly to systems that benefit from your compliance. This consciousness involves distinguishing between genuine needs and manufactured wants, between investments that increase your independence and expenses that increase your dependence. It also requires building what economists call economic resilience, the ability to maintain your basic needs with minimal dependence on income sources that require compliance with others' objectives rather than pursuit of your authentic values. This might involve reducing expenses, developing multiple income streams, building skills that create value independently of employment structures, or creating lifestyle arrangements that require less money to maintain. The goal is not to reject economic participation entirely, but to participate on terms that serve your development rather than your limitation, your authentic values rather than manufactured desires, your long-term freedom rather than short-term comfort that requires continued compliance with arrangements designed to benefit from your participation more than to serve your flourishing. Information control and narrative management. The control of information represents one of the most sophisticated aspects of modern obedience systems, operating through the appearance of abundant information access while actually managing which information reaches you, how it's presented, and what conclusions you're encouraged to draw from it. This control shapes your understanding of reality in ways that serve system stability rather than your authentic comprehension of your circumstances and options. Unlike historical forms of censorship that operated through obvious suppression, contemporary information control operates through what could be called guided abundance, providing so much information that most people cannot process it effectively while ensuring that the most accessible, appealing, and socially supported information serves approved narratives rather than independent analysis. Search algorithms determine which information you see first when you seek answers to questions, prioritizing sources that serve commercial and political objectives rather than accuracy, completeness, or utility for your decision-making. Social media algorithms determine which perspectives reach your attention, creating filter bubbles that reinforce existing beliefs rather than exposing you to information that might challenge your assumptions or reveal alternative possibilities. News media operates through what communications researchers call agenda setting, determining not what you should think about specific issues, but which issues deserve your attention and which can be safely ignored. The media doesn't need to tell you what to think about climate change, economic policy, or international conflicts. It just needs to determine how much attention these issues receive relative to celebrity scandals, sports events, or local crime stories that have no bearing on your actual circumstances or choices. Educational institutions manage information through curriculum design that emphasizes certain types of knowledge while de-emphasizing others, creating graduates who are technically educated but lack the intellectual tools necessary for independent analysis of the systems they're trained to serve. You learn to analyze literature, solve mathematical problems, or understand scientific principles without learning to question whether the institutional arrangements that employ these skills serve human flourishing or simply concentrate power in the hands of those who control access to such employment. Even entertainment serves information control functions by shaping your emotional associations with different types of people, values, and social arrangements. Movies, television shows, and books don't just entertain, they teach you what to admire, fear, desire, and reject in ways that serve commercial and political objectives, rather than your authentic moral development or accurate understanding of human possibilities. The sophistication of this control lies in its ability to make you feel well-informed while actually limiting your access to information that might enable you to recognize how your compliance serves others' interests more than your own. You can access vast amounts of information about topics that don't threaten system stability while remaining ignorant about alternatives that might better serve human flourishing but would threaten existing power arrangements. Breaking through information control requires developing what could be called source consciousness, awareness of who benefits from the information you receive and what interests are served by presenting information in particular ways. This consciousness involves asking questions about who funded the research you're reading, who profits from the conclusions you're encouraged to accept, and what alternatives are not being presented for your consideration. It also requires developing narrative resistance, the ability to recognize when information is being presented to support predetermined conclusions, rather than to enable your independent analysis. This involves paying attention to what information is emphasized versus what is minimized, what questions are encouraged versus what questions are discouraged, and what sources are considered credible versus what sources are dismissed without examination. The goal is not to become paranoid or to reject all information sources, but to become conscious of how information shapes your understanding and to seek out perspectives that might not be commercially or politically supported, but that provide more complete pictures of your circumstances and options. The rebellion paradox. Perhaps the most ingenious aspect of modern control systems is their ability to co-opt rebellion itself, channeling authentic dissatisfaction with system limitations into forms of resistance that ultimately serve system stability rather than challenging fundamental arrangements that create the problems rebels claim to oppose. This co-optation operates through what could be called managed rebellion, providing approved outlets for dissatisfaction that allow people to feel rebellious while actually supporting the very structures they think they're resisting. The system doesn't suppress rebellion, it commercializes it, politicizes it, and redirects it toward targets that don't threaten system stability. Consumer rebellion involves rejecting certain products, brands, or lifestyle choices, while remaining completely dependent on consumer culture itself. You can rebel against McDonald's by eating at organic restaurants that cost more money and require more time, keeping you more firmly trapped in economic systems that benefit from your increased spending and time investment in consumption decisions. Political rebellion involves supporting alternative candidates or parties while remaining completely dependent on political systems designed to prevent fundamental change, regardless of which approved alternatives gain temporary control. You can rebel against Republicans by supporting Democrats or vice versa, while never questioning whether electoral systems themselves serve citizen interests or power concentration that benefits from citizen participation in choosing between predetermined alternatives. Cultural rebellion involves adopting alternative aesthetic choices, lifestyle practices, or social attitudes while remaining completely dependent on economic and social systems that benefit from your expression of approved forms of non-conformity. You can rebel against mainstream culture by adopting counterculture styles that require purchasing different products from companies that profit from counterculture marketing. Even spiritual rebellion often serves system stability by encouraging focus on personal transformation while discouraging attention to social arrangements that might require collective action to change. You can rebel against materialism by pursuing spiritual development that makes you more accepting of material conditions that serve others' interests while providing you with psychological comfort that reduces motivation for practical resistance. The rebellion paradox operates by making resistance feel satisfying while ensuring that resistance doesn't threaten the fundamental arrangements that create the conditions rebels claim to oppose. You get the psychological benefits of rebellion, feeling independent, morally superior, and authentic, while providing economic and political benefits to the same systems that created the problems that motivated your rebellion. Breaking through managed rebellion requires what could be called rebellion consciousness, the ability to distinguish between forms of resistance that actually threaten system stability and forms that serve system stability while providing psychological satisfaction to participants. This consciousness involves asking hard questions about whether your rebellious activities actually reduce your dependence on systems that benefit from your compliance or simply redirect that dependence toward alternative products, candidates, or practices that serve the same underlying power structures. True rebellion often involves choices that don't feel rebellious because they don't provide the social identity benefits that managed rebellion offers. Reducing your economic dependence through lifestyle simplification doesn't feel as rebellious as boycotting specific corporations while maintaining overall consumer participation. Building local community resilience doesn't feel as rebellious as supporting national political movements that promise to solve problems through existing institutional mechanisms. Authentic rebellion typically requires sacrificing the social approval that comes from participating in popular forms of resistance in favor of practical changes that actually reduce your dependence on systems that benefit from your compliance. This sacrifice feels uncomfortable because it eliminates the social benefits of rebellion while requiring the work of building alternatives that may not be socially recognized or commercially supported. The technology of surveillance and behavioral modification. Modern control systems have evolved beyond the need for obvious surveillance or direct behavioral control by developing technologies that monitor your behavior and modify it through seemingly voluntary interactions with devices, platforms, and services that you choose to use because they provide convenience, entertainment, or social connection. This technological control operates through what behavioral economists call choice architecture, designing the environment in which you make decisions to influence those decisions in predetermined directions while maintaining the appearance of free choice. The system doesn't force you to behave in specific ways, it simply makes certain behaviors easier, more convenient, and more socially rewarded than alternatives. Your smartphone doesn't force you to check it constantly. It simply provides variable reward schedules through notifications, social media feedback, and app designs that trigger psychological mechanisms evolved for survival in environments very different from modern technological environments. The result is behavioral patterns that serve technological platforms more than your authentic interests while feeling voluntary and enjoyable to you. Social media platforms don't force you to share personal information. They simply make sharing easier and more socially rewarded than privacy, while making privacy appear antisocial, paranoid, or technically difficult for average users to maintain. The result is unprecedented levels of voluntary surveillance that provide commercial and political actors with detailed information about your preferences, relationships, and behavior patterns. E-commerce platforms don't force you to make purchases. They simply use detailed behavioral data to present purchasing opportunities at moments when you're most likely to buy, using psychological triggers that bypass conscious decision-making in favor of impulse responses that serve commercial objectives rather than your careful consideration of whether purchases serve your authentic needs or values. Search engines don't force you to accept specific information. They simply prioritize information that serves commercial and political objectives, while making alternative information harder to find, less appealing to access, or socially stigmatized to consider. The result is voluntary information consumption that shapes your understanding in ways that serve others' objectives rather than your independent analysis. The sophistication of technological control lies in its ability to modify your behavior through your own choices while making those choices feel voluntary, enjoyable, and socially supported. You don't feel manipulated because the manipulation operates through mechanisms that provide genuine short-term benefits, convenience, entertainment, social connection, while creating long-term dependencies that serve commercial and political objectives rather than your authentic development. Breaking free from technological control requires developing what could be called technological consciousness, understanding how your interactions with technology shape your behavior in ways that may serve others' objectives more than your own. This consciousness involves paying attention to how different technologies affect your attention, decision-making, relationships, and understanding of reality. It also requires developing technological autonomy, the ability to use technology strategically to serve your authentic objectives, rather than being used by technology to serve others' objectives. This involves making conscious choices about which technologies to use, how to use them, and when to avoid them based on whether they enhance or diminish your capacity for independent thought, authentic relationship, and meaningful activity. The goal is not to reject technology entirely, but to maintain conscious control over how technology influences your life, rather than unconsciously adapting your life to serve technological systems that may benefit from your engagement more than they serve your development. The path to authentic rebellion. Breaking free from systems designed to ensure your obedience requires understanding that authentic rebellion is not about dramatic gestures or symbolic resistance, but about systematically reducing your dependence on arrangements that benefit from your compliance while building alternatives that serve your authentic development and values. This process begins with what could be called dependency assessment, honest evaluation of how your current lifestyle, relationships, and activities depend on systems that may not serve your authentic interests. This assessment involves examining your economic dependencies, social dependencies, emotional dependencies, and information dependencies to understand how they might influence your choices in ways that serve others' objectives rather than your own. Economic dependency assessment involves understanding how your financial obligations, career requirements, and lifestyle expenses create pressures to maintain compliance with economic arrangements that may extract more value from your participation than they provide in return. This doesn't mean rejecting economic participation, but rather understanding how to participate on terms that serve your development rather than your limitation. Social dependency assessment involves understanding how your relationships, social identity, and community connections might create pressures to maintain compliance with social expectations that serve group stability more than individual authenticity. This doesn't mean becoming antisocial, but rather building relationships that support your authentic development rather than requiring your limitation. Information dependency assessment involves understanding how your knowledge sources, entertainment choices, and communication channels might shape your understanding in ways that serve commercial or political objectives rather than your independent analysis. This doesn't mean rejecting all information sources, but rather diversifying your sources and developing critical thinking skills that enable independent evaluation. The next phase involves what could be called alternative building, developing systems, skills, relationships, and practices that reduce your dependence on arrangements that require your compliance, while increasing your capacity for autonomous choice. This building process typically requires patience, because alternatives often take time to develop and may not provide immediate benefits comparable to existing arrangements. Economic alternatives might involve developing skills that create value independently of employment structures, reducing expenses to decrease income requirements, building savings that provide options during transitions, or creating income streams that align with your authentic values rather than requiring compromise of those values for financial survival. Social alternatives might involve building relationships with people who support your authentic development rather than requiring your accommodation, developing community connections that provide mutual support rather than one-sided obligation, or creating social activities that serve genuine enjoyment and development rather than just maintaining appearances or social status. Information alternatives might involve developing direct experience and practical skills that provide knowledge independent of official sources, building relationships with people who have diverse perspectives and experiences, or learning to evaluate information based on its utility for your decision-making rather than its social acceptability or commercial appeal. The final phase involves what could be called integration, living according to your authentic values while maintaining appropriate engagement with systems that you cannot completely avoid but no longer depend on for your basic well-being, identity, or decision-making authority. This integration requires ongoing balance between practical necessities and authentic priorities. The path to authentic rebellion is not about perfect purity or complete withdrawal from all systems, but about conscious engagement that serves your development rather than your limitation, your authentic values rather than manufactured desires, your long-term freedom rather than short-term comfort, that requires continued compliance with arrangements designed to benefit from your participation more than to serve your flourishing. The price of freedom. Understanding the system's hidden agenda for obedience comes with a sobering recognition. Authentic freedom requires sacrifices that most people are unwilling to make. Not because the sacrifices are inherently valuable, but because they involve giving up comforts, securities, and social approval that feel necessary even when they serve others' interests more than your own. The price of freedom includes economic sacrifice, choosing financial independence over maximum income, lifestyle simplicity over consumer participation, long-term autonomy over short-term comfort. This doesn't mean embracing poverty, but rather understanding that some forms of wealth creation require compromises that may cost more in terms of life satisfaction and authentic development than they provide in terms of financial security. The price includes social sacrifice, choosing authentic relationships over popular ones, meaningful community over convenient networks, genuine respect over universal approval. This often means being misunderstood by people who remain invested in systems that require compliance for participation, being excluded from social activities that require value compromises you're unwilling to make. The price includes psychological sacrifice, choosing uncertainty over false security, responsibility over blame, growth over comfort. This means accepting anxiety that comes with making independent decisions rather than following prescribed paths, accepting responsibility for outcomes rather than having others to blame when following their advice leads to unsatisfactory results. The price includes intellectual sacrifice, choosing independent analysis over expert authority, nuanced understanding over simple explanations, ongoing learning over settled conclusions. This means doing the mental work of evaluating information and making decisions rather than accepting others' conclusions about what you should think, want, or do. But these sacrifices reveal themselves to be investments rather than losses when you discover what becomes possible, when you stop serving others' agendas and start serving your authentic development. The economic sacrifice of consumer participation often leads to financial freedom that consumer participation prevents. The social sacrifice of popular approval often leads to authentic relationships that popular approval makes impossible. The psychological sacrifice of false security often leads to genuine confidence that false security undermines. The intellectual sacrifice of expert dependence often leads to practical wisdom that expert dependence prevents from developing. Most importantly, choosing freedom over obedience serves others as well as yourself because it demonstrates alternatives that others might not have considered, creates examples of different ways of living that might inspire others' authentic development, and reduces your participation in systems that require others' compliance as well as your own. Your freedom doesn't require others' imprisonment. It often reveals that others' imprisonment is as voluntary as your own was, that the chains that bind them are as removable as the chains that bound you, that the system's power depends on voluntary compliance that can be withdrawn when people understand how their compliance serves others' interests more than their own. The system wants you obedient because your obedience serves its stability, not because obedience serves your development or authentic interests. Your rebellion serves not just your own liberation, but the possibility of liberation for others who are waiting for examples of how to live authentically in a world designed to prevent authentic living. The choice is yours. Continue serving agendas you never agreed to support, or discover what becomes possible when you stop being obedient and start being authentic. The system's hidden agenda has been revealed. Your response to that revelation determines whether you remain a willing participant in your own limitation or become a conscious creator of your own liberation. They want you obedient. You have the power to choose disobedience that serves life, rather than systems designed to prevent life from flourishing. The question is whether you have the courage to choose freedom over the comfort of continued compliance with arrangements designed to benefit from your participation more than to serve your authentic development. Your authentic life awaits your rebellion against everything that prevents its emergence. Begin now.